Hi everyone, my name is Gabriel and this is the Hour of the Raven, your channel for everything Ravenloft, RPG, Dungeons and Dragons, and horror.
Today, we will unravel the profane secrets of Inahira. The Arcanoloth who made a sinister pact with Count Strahd von Zarovich and now craves revenge. Are you ready? While we are enslaved by Duke Gundar's mental domination, we serve as his spies in search of information and allies for his plans of revenge. In the city of Tilferdorf, in Barovia, we enter the old and decrepit mansion of a local magistrate, and we feel a strong evil aura. The old magistrate who receives us seems to read our souls with his penetrating gaze. It doesn't take long before he decides to show himself in his true form, like a monstrous, hellish creature with the face of a jackal. Wolves on leeches, I can offer a solution to your dilemmas. In horror, we listen to the insidious words and profane proposal of Inahira, the deceiver, the negotiator of souls and unholy pacts.
Hour of the Raven.
For more than 3 centuries I searched for you, but I knew you would return here. Where is the book, Strahd von Zarovich? Where is the book, Oathbreaker? Nahira is an Arcanoloth, a type of Yugoloth, an evil fiend from the lower planes of Gehenna. The Arcanoloth first appeared in 1993 on the last and sixth adventure of the Grand Conjunction series, and had a prominent role in Strahd von Zarovich's past and in the outcome of the last sign of the prophecy. The sign of Skoza's prophecy that involved Inahira told that he would reverse his destiny. It is curious to note that the name Inahira, if read backwards, is Arijani, the name of the Dark Lord Rakshasa from Sri Haji's domain. In an online research, I found reference that the adventure Web of Illusions, which is situated in the domain of Sri Haji with the Rakshasa Arijani, was originally conceived to compose the events of the Grand Conjunction, but was later removed from this contest. In the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons, the Curse of Strahd adventure has no reference to Inahira's presence in Count Strahd's past. Considering that the adventure proposed to be a new version of the original I6 adventure Ravenloft, and that in the original adventure Inahira also had no participation, the option for his exclusion is understandable. However, the presence of the Arcanoloth Nephron in the Ember Temple caught my attention, as there was a creature of similar purpose and nature in the adventure. Inahira would only be swallowed up by the mists of Ravenloft after the events of the Grand Conjunction, and Curse of Strahd take place 5 years before these events. Considering the many inconsistencies of Curse of Strahd with the old campaign setting, and Inahira's exclusion from the text describing Strahd's past, this may be an indicator that, if there are future Ravenloft publications, Inahira will not be reinserted in the campaign setting. Inahira, also known as the Pariah Fiend and the Deceiver, can take many forms. Its true form is that of a huge humanoid figure, dressed in the clothes of a sage or a mage, with the body covered with yellowish fur and the head of a jackal. His black eyes emanate cunning and evil, and his hands have twisted claws. The Arcanoloth can change his form at will, but when he takes on a human form, the proud Inahira rarely changes into someone who is poor or destitute of any position of power. Inahira is highly persuasive, charismatic, and intelligent, and will do everything in his power to corrupt and influence people to achieve his goals. Inahira will present himself to mortals as someone docile and harmless, to make them believe they are in a position of advantage in their bargains. However, his evil mind can predict countless scenarios and alternatives. Known by the name of the Deceiver, Many have been the fools who lost their souls and fell to his promises, to celebrate profane contracts with the creature. Inahira's profane powers allow him to create unholy contracts, through which he grants boons to mortals, in bargain for dark favors or the servitude of their souls after death. Inahiras cannot use any of his supernatural powers to coerce any mortal to sign such contracts, nor can he directly harm those with whom he has contracts. However, there is nothing that prevents him from manipulating people and events in an indirect way to deceive or harm those who signed these unholy contracts. Although he is a terrible opponent, Inahira prefers to avoid direct combat and likes to use intrigue and manipulation to overcome his enemies. As a superior Yugoloth, Inahira is resistant to spells and totally immune to attacks of fire, poison, acid, and mental attacks. His body can only be wounded by powerful magic weapons, and his claws have a debilitating poison. The Arcanoloth can fly and shapeshift to the form of any humanoid creature whenever it wishes, while also being able to communicate telepathically with creatures that understand any type of language. Inahira can use mystical abilities and cast spells as a wizard of great power, and hold numerous magical items for his protection, among them a wand of dispel magic. Defeating Inahira in combat will not destroy the fiend. His soul is linked to a phylactery, his new Book of Keeping, and even if destroyed, he will begin the process of possessing the body of some unfortunate humanoid creature until he takes complete possession and rebuild his body. The book that contains Inahira's souls is a black letter tome, which remains disquietly warm to touch. It is in this unholy book that are registered all contracts celebrated by the fiend, and it is the source of its power and prestige, the receptacle of the soul damned to serve him. Only through its destruction can this monster finally be destroyed. But what profane secrets hide this infernal creature's past? What is his connection to the cruel Count Strahd von Zarovich and the events of the Grand Conjunction? Inahira appeared in the furnace of Gehenna, one of the lower planes of existence that represent the spectrum of evil and neutrality. Through cunning, betrayal, and manipulation, he rose to the position of Arcanoloth. Inahira played the role of a scribe, a negotiator, a lawyer, and a guardian of knowledge. One of the highest ranks in the hierarchy of the lower planes of Gehenna, the Arcanoloths command the lower hierarchies of Yugoloths, and create and record the contracts, files, and accounts of the lower plane. Inahira worked in the Blood War, mediating negotiations and contracts between devils, demons, and Yugoloths in the endless conflict of the lower planes of chaos. Its objective was to accumulate power and enslave many souls to one day ascend to the post of Ultraloth, the peak of Gehenna's hierarchy. Due to a series of misfortunes, rivalries, and bad choices, Inahira was far from his goal. He needed a triumph, and aimed at corrupting the soul of a mortal of great potential to influence the fate of the material world, to accumulate even more power and souls under his command in his Book of Keeping. When Inahira answered a mystical summon and found the desperate General Strahd von Zarovich, his fortune finally seemed to have changed. Tired and exhausted from the horrors of an interminable war, and in face of what seemed like a humiliating defeat, Strahd agreed to bargain his soul with Inahira in exchange for revenge and victory over the Turks, to repel the invaders and liberate Barovia, the land of his ancestors. Strahd, suspecting mischief from the Arcanoloth, demanded a guarantee of compliance with the bargain before leading his men into what appeared to be a suicide battle. He demanded that, until the moment of his death, when Inahira would collect his soul, should be in possession of the Inahira's Book of Keeping. Seeing the power gain and potential for the corruption of a soul of a man marked by fate like Strahd von Zarovich, and Ahira agreed at the mortal's demand. Strahd was already a middle-aged man, and a few years or decades would make little difference to an immortal creature like Inahira. Furthermore, a mortal and a warrior would not be able to offer real risk to the great Inahira the Deceiver. Inahira would never collect the result of this unholy bargain. Despite helping Strahd with his mystical boons and help him to win the battles against the thugs, Strahd somehow escaped the prime material plane of existence, being taken away by the mists, carrying with him his precious Book of Keeping, the source of Inahira's prestige and power. Without his Book of Keeping, Inahira was weakened and dared not return to Gehenna, where he would be demoted and humiliated by his peers. Furious, Inahira sought by various means of divination to locate Strahd and his book, without success. For 397 years, Inahira wandered the material plane in search of his goal, an outcast and pariah to those who inhabited the lower planes. However, in 740 of the Barovian calendar, he had his chance for revenge. Skulza, the Dukar, had prophesied that 6 signs that would precede the Grand Conjunction, an event that would bring the end of the Land of the Mists. King Azalin, the Dark Lord of Darkon, manipulated events to speed up the signs of the Grand Conjunction, and ended up anticipating the last and 6th sign of the prophecy, before the 5th sign had been completed. For a brief period, the Mist released their prisoners, and Strahd and Azalin returned to the material plane where Barovia once was located. After centuries of waiting, Inahira finally sensed the proximity of his Book of Keeping and the soul of the traitor Strahd von Zarovich. Azalin, trying to consolidate the last signs of the prophecy, and to make the fiend Inahira finally obtain Strahd's soul. Meanwhile, Strahd found once again an incarnation of Tatiana in the material plane. Unable to find the Book of Keeping that was protected by Strahd, Inahira kidnapped Queen Christiana, the reincarnation of Tatiana, and demanded that Strahd returned his book. This intense impasse was resolved in a confrontation between Azalin, Strahd, Inahira, and a group of adventurers. Thanks to the intervention of these heroes, Inahira's Book of Keeping was destroyed by the holy symbol of Ravenkind. With this act, the last sign of Skulza's prophecy was not fulfilled, and the end of the Lands of the Mists was averted. Strahd, Azalin, and Inahira were swallowed up by the mists as prisoners of the Demiplane of Dread. Inahira had been so close to reversing his destiny, but now he was permanently weakened, with the power accumulated for ages in this Book of Keeping destroyed by the holy symbol of Ravenkind. Inahira emerged in the Demiplane of Dread somewhere in Barovia, and soon discovered that he was prevented from leaving this plane of existence. The mysterious dark power that ruled this Demiplane had given him a new Book of Keeping, an artifact bound in a profane black leather, strangely warm to the touch. This tome had also become the phylactery of his black soul, the source of his power in this prison of mists. The Arcanologue devoted the next few years of its existence to researching the nature of its mystical prison. For centuries, he had searched for Count Strahd, and now he had discovered that the Count had become the Dark Lord of a prison of mists, forever tormented by the dark powers. With a new Book of Keeping, Inahira has resumed his trade and has been negotiating numerous contracts with fools, ambitious, and desperate mortals, reconstructing the source of his power. The Arcanologue longs to leave this prison of mists, but not before obtaining his long-awaited revenge against Count Strahd. Inahira exposed to us the terms of the contract, and it seems to us too good to be true. Accept to serve me, and I will free you from Duke Gundhar's dominant influence, and I will prevent the curse of lycanthropy from affecting your bodies when the full moon hits the skies. All I ask in return for those gifts are two services. First, I want you to find the whereabouts of Tara Koliana, an anchorite of the Church of Ezra, who travels through Hazlan, and bring me a lock of her hair. Then, you must travel to Borka to investigate the Deslingsia family, to find and bring me an old Barovian relic, the Amulet of Souls, an artifact lost for generations with one of the members of that infamous family. Follow this bargain, and the blessings I grant you will be permanent. Break our agreement, and your souls will belong to me when you die, to serve me for eternity. Desperate to get rid of the supernatural slavery imposed by Duke Gundar, and tormented by our terrible curse of lycanthropy, we are seduced by the arguments of the insidious Arkanoloff. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and if we stick to the terms of the contract, our souls will be safe. With trembling hands, we signed the unholy pact, and we felt a profane energy running through our bodies. We are finally free from the compulsion to obey Duke Gundar, and we did not fear the arrival of the full moon. Join us, subscribe to this channel, and activate notifications, and together we will journey to the domain of Hazlan, a land of ancient secrets and mysteries, dominated by a cruel wizard